If you care about happiness even a fraction as much as I do, you're going to want to hear from our next guest. She's Amy Smith, and she's the Joy Junkie, podcaster, coach, speaker, writer. She does it all.
You know.
Welcome to the show.
So great to meet you, Amy.
Likewise.
Yeah.
I'm
Amy.
so honored to be here.
I am a junkie, but I've never heard of a joy junkie. What
Yes.
does that mean?
Well, you know, it's so interesting talking about the dynamics in LA and how there's this extreme focus on health, and everyone's got, you know, their Zen and their methodology and their thing that works for them. And you know, I saw so many people who were turning to things that actually weren't healthy, you know, and that were so incredibly addicting, that was not leading to any type of fulfillment, wasn't leading to any type of richer connections with other people. And I thought, what would change if we were as addicted to our happiness?
You know I love that.
My brother, yeah. Addicted to our happiness as we are to everything else that tells us we need to look a specific way, or check off all the boxes, or do feminine right, or do masculine or boss right. And so I loved what JJ and Liz had to say, because those are the things that we're kind of, we fall into this pattern of here's what we're supposed to look like and here's what equals happiness, without really internally checking in.
I will say right now that I think a lot of people feel guilty about being happy or investing in the search for their happiness, because there's so many other things they have to invest in, right? Their health, their careers, you know, building their finances and security and all those things. Happiness isn't the top of the list for most people.
That's right, that's right. And how's that working out?
Horribly.
Right. We have the other addictions, right? We have all of these other things that we go, oh, this must make me happy. And you come up empty. And I see it really pervasively in kind of the 30s, 40s, and 50s crowd, where they go, I thought happiness was supposed to be here by now. I did all the things. I checked all the boxes. So what the hell is this? And I know you have such a great story about that too in your own life. And I think that we need to switch what we think about love, self-love in particular. Like, we don't look at any other nature of love between humans, between animals, between mom and child, or we don't look at love in any other approximation and go, that's selfish. So why the hell would we do that towards ourselves?
I just love that.
Right?
One of my favorite expressions is Abraham Hicks, and they essentially say, isn't it weird when people say to you, you know, you're so selfish to not do what I selfishly want you to do? It's essentially what people say.
Totally.
Right? Like, you didn't do X, Y, or Z that I wanted you to do, so you're selfish. Hello?
Right,
So we're
right.
all self-interested.
Yeah.
And talk to us a little bit about that, because I know you've had a very interesting journey sort of like getting to this place where you are self-loving and you are, you know, happy and all those things. Like, what was your journey?
Oh,
like
Jesus, how
there?
much time do we have?
Open the floodgates.
I know, and I'm like, damn, tissues. So I grew up in a really conservative, born-again Christian family. And in working through a lot of those issues, I have uncovered that it was fairly cult-like and very militant, and a lot of being enveloped by guilt and fear. Every behavior, every choice was always about avoiding the guilt, like what would look favorable in my family's life. And you know, like, my dad really wasn't messing around. He had a master's in divinity, a doctorate in ministry, like, they were on board, right? And I felt like there was this big piece missing about intuition. I feel like that's our divinity, that's our God. We already have it, everybody. Spoiler alert, we already have it. And so I had a very pivotal moment. I was involved in personal development. I have been for like a good 10, 15 years, but I lost my father in 07. And then, thank you for saying that, but it was actually a beautiful, incredible experience that I'm super grateful for. But I performed my father's makeup for his viewing. Yeah, so I did makeup on my dead dad. And spoke to the service. And later that day, my mom said, it just feels like we failed as parents. And I'm thinking, now wait, I'm the kid who has been working since she was 14, put herself through college, got married, moved out of the house, have had my own career, my own independence, and I'm a failure. I just did makeup on my dead father, you know? And you're telling me that I'm a failure in some way. And I also have two siblings who happen to do jail time and have had a really tumultuous life. And my mom groups us all together because we're all not in the faith. So that's kind of the only thing that matters.
So that was success for her.
Right. And I realized that there was a point, this was kind of like the love you guys were talking about, like a release with love sort of situation, that I had a decision to make at that point. There are some decisions, like coming out of the closet, like filing for divorce, like asking an adult child to move out of the house, that it is an ultimatum. It is, I either choose you or I choose me. Like, we either choose your happiness at total cost of self, or I actually go, hey, I'm gonna allow that to be your responsibility. If you're gonna carry the burden of my soul, knock yourself out. I'm chilling over here. And so that began a trajectory where the next phase, I got so adversarial and combative. And I'm like, let's talk about gay rights. Let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about everything that's awkward and adversarial between my mother and I. And then I realized that, oh, you can actually give voice to things. You can actually speak up for yourself with grace and kindness. You don't have to be an asshole. You can actually ask for a divorce and be incredibly compassionate.
And this is one of the things that I love so much about you, Amy. I attended Kira Sabin's retreat, mutual friend, and you spoke. And what you had to say was so powerful, and I think it's one of your greatest gifts, is teaching people how to be themselves fully, deeply, right, and authentically, and say no to other people when necessary, but do it in ways that are graceful and kind, certainly kind to yourself, and but also kind to them. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think people struggle with that. They know that they don't really want to be doing X, Y, or Z. They're doing it out of obligation or guilt.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not making them happy. They don't want to do it, but they also don't want to let people down. So.
Yeah. So I really think it's kind of twofold, right? I feel like there's the internal piece of truly believing that your voice matters, that my wants, opinions, needs, stances are just as important as somebody else's, just as important as your boss, just as important as your parent, or your guru that you're studying from. So there's that internal piece of what I am is already innately enough, right? And then there's the second piece of how do I communicate that to the world? What are the actual language phrases that I would use to say, oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Unfortunately, I'm not available, instead of making up some lie, right? So I always try to operate from the mantra of don't let your silence make you a liar. If there's something that you are, tweet it, everybody, tweet it.
Wow, production, I'm gonna need a pen. Taking notes.
Because I think there's a lot of times we buy it. We have a ton of phrases for them, like rocking the boat or opening up a can of worms, where we go, no. Better for you to be a liar, essentially, inauthentic, and not say what's real for you. And all that comes down to is a fear, right? It's the It's the primitive fear you were talking about earlier of what if I'm not loved? What if I might die? I mean, that's really the primitive.
The interesting thing about Amy is that, well, I am a doctor of divinity,
Yes.
and
Awesome.
and I believe that what you're teaching right now is really, my schooling is in, it's metaphysics, really, if you will. It's science of mind. It's understanding that we do have it all inside of us. It's not up there, and you're not wrong or bad if you don't, preach to whatever's there. And so I truly believe that your dad and your mother have been incredible teachers for you, because look, you're literally teaching ministry right now. You're teaching truth. To have your voice and that specific thing is ministry. And so I think it's so ironic and beautiful how life works. And knowing the perfection of it. And so. My question really is, when someone comes to you, when they are working with you, what does that process look like? How do you teach this, right? How do you teach somebody to find their voice?
Yeah, oh, such a good question. Well, there's a whole 12-step program for it. Ironically enough, my program is 12 steps. Yeah, it's 12 weeks. But we start internal, and we start looking at the basis of kind of the roots of the tree, right? So if we have the branches and the fruit, that's kind of how we think and our emotions. Underneath all of that is a pervasive belief that's fueling everything. So we can kind of band-aid ourselves up with an affirmation here or there, but if you're not operating from a place of value, then that will permeate every relationship. It'll permeate every behavior choice and your language and your words and how you use them externally and internally. So we start there and we dismantle all of the stuff that's not working. Then we move into, who do you want to be? Like, what really lights you up? Who is Jez? Like, what does she want to accomplish in this world? What really brings her that fulfillment? And then we move into how does that relate to other people? How do we actually say no? How do we establish boundaries when everybody else is handing you this giant pile of guilt and you have that choice of like, do I take this in? Or do I go, oh, I'm currently not accepting that, right?
No guilt here.
So that's sort of the trajectory. And then we look at maintenance, because I don't want anybody to ever be dependent on me. Then my job has not been done, right? I'm about creating that mirror and saying like, look, at the beginning, just take my word for it that you're enough, but we're gonna get you to that place where it's
Right.
so in
You
your-
can really
no.
rewire like that? Because I can
Absolutely.
hear you and I can believe that, but I don't know if I really believe that.
Right.
Those roots run so deep.
Of course.
So how do you change that? I mean, how are you literally rewiring someone?
Yeah, so, well, it's, I'm like, gosh, we spent an entire 2 or 3 weeks on that in particular. A lot of it is about understanding the subconscious messages that you received in your youth and attached to them as fact and then lived into them. So what's so beautiful about that is we do that subconsciously. We don't go, let me just forever believe I'm not enough and that will negatively impact my first marriage, second, nobody does that. We just go, oh, I should probably get a degree, or I should, and we don't think about how all of the messaging that we've received from media, from any source, largely from family of origin, how we take a set of circumstances and then we go, oh, that must mean I'm only valuable if I'm witty, or whatever it might look like. So we do some processes of, excavating and getting some stuff out, which is so fun.
Oh my God.
It's painful, right? Like, show me somebody with a rockin' bod who hasn't been in pain from physical activity, right? Like, you don't get them gains by chilling out and having no.
Yeah.
That's why I'm crying
pain.
like every day, every morning. I'm crying.
It's
Just to get that body.
it's so wonderful to talk. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. But it's such important work. And I truly believe that whether you're going to, scripture or to self-help, it really is all the same. The interpretations may be a little twisted.
That's right.
Christ consciousness is really awakening that highest consciousness within us. So I know for sure that it's not about the preacher, it's about the truth. And you are teaching that at whatever level. So thank you so much for, contributing. And where can people find you?
Everywhere online as The Joy Junkie. Junkie is Junkie. And I do a podcast weekly with my husband, who's kind of the Robin to my Batman.
He's dope.
Yeah,
dope.
he's a gem. So there's tons of free stuff over at thejoyjunkie.com, and come hang out. I'll show you.
I'm there.
So awesome.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with more. Good morning, La La Land.